The enemy has infiltrated Jupiter headquarters. Alienators have sabotaged all systems and planted bombs throughout its 30 levels, ready to blast headquarters to ashes at any moment. Can their mission of destruction be stopped? Already, Jupiter number 1 is starting to crumble. Can it be saved? Can the other two capacitors be reached before the Alienators advance and destroy them as well? It's up to you. Originally released in the winter-spring era of 1983, I'll say March, based off magazines mentioning it in May. If you believe Wiki, they give the exact date of February 26th of 83, so March. It's possible it received a simultaneous release for the Atari 8-bit line and the Commodore 64, but the Atari 800 appears to be the origined system. Today, we are covering Jumpman. As mentioned, a port would be released simultaneously or quickly thereafter for the Commodore 64, followed by ports to the Apple II and the PC via a booter disk. It was also one of the first to have a quote-unquote upgraded release for the PC Junior, published by IBM themselves. Today, we'll be covering the Commodore 64 version. It was developed by Randy Glover, both on the Atari and the 64, and published by Automated Simulations/Epix. And this may be the last time that the Automated Simulations name was associated with them. Not in-game, the box does mention Automated Simulations. Epix was the arcade subsidiary of Automated Simulations, but this game would be so successful that hereafter they would just be known as Epix. Let's start off taking a look at the manual. You are Jupiter Jumpman. You have the speed, skill, and 7 lives necessary to outwit the alienators. You have the ability to scale ladders, girders, ropes, and mysterious mazes to quickly find the bombs, and only you know how to defuse them. Your joystick activates your jet boosters, enabling you to leap around each level of headquarters while avoiding deadly obstacles. Jump on target and you'll succeed. Restore power, defuse the bombs, and save Jupiter. Miss your target and you might find yourself dangling from a ledge with all but your 7th life gone. Jumpman offers a variety of ways to play. 5 game variations, 30 game levels, and from 1 to 4 players can play. Also, you can choose how fast or slow you wish your Jumpman to move the object to successfully complete all 30 game levels, scoring as many points as you can. You complete each level by making Jumpman collect all the bombs before the many dangers wipe out Jumpman's 7 lives. So I would say I needed that manual to make me understand that this apparently takes place on Jupiter. Although it's not made perfectly clear that Jupiter headquarters is on the planet Jupiter, but that's what I got from it. And that Jumpman is not actually jumping, he's using jet boosters. Well, I guess you would need jet boosters on Jupiter, that is, if the gravity didn't crush you first. And finally, that we are finding and defusing bombs, not collecting treasure. Well, apparently I got everything wrong about this game on my first impression. Other than that there are bullets in it, I actually guessed that one right. So in terms of the story, it is laughable but enjoyable, adding to the flavor of the game. They did everything they could without going too far, which is a real danger for this era of games. So Jumpman I would call a arcade-styled platformer with multiple single screens. Clearly we are being inspired by Donkey Kong, where its main character, Mario, was originally known as Jumpman. But this game goes far beyond clone status. It would actually prove that anything you could do at the arcades, you could do at home, and in fact, you could do it better. While there had been a number of wonderful, unique games made prior to this on the consoles and especially the computers, some would even come from Epix themselves, like the Temple of Apache. But when it came to games which emulated the arcades, which is what a lot of people wanted at home, prior to Miner 2049er, Load Runner, and Jumpman, the best you could usually hope for at home was a half-assed conversion done by Atari, because they don't want to jeopardize their arcade business by doing decent ports. Or you would have the blatant rip-offs, whether they be decent or horrible. Let's get in some perspective with the magazine's run. The Commodore 64 and VIC-20 magazine, May 1984. Meet the affordable portable. 30 games for the price of one. How good is Jumpman? A friend of mine says he's going to buy a Commodore 64 just so he can play it. That may be a bit extreme, but if you already own your computer, this is a recommended purchase. Jumpman is a machine language arcade-style game that falls into the running, jumping, climbing category, along with games such as Donkey Kong and Miner 2049er. But with its 30 different screens, it outshines all the others. The 30 screens could be uninspired variations of one theme, and mechanics of play could be downright dull. Not so in this case. Each screen is a delightful new challenge. In effect, you have 30 different arcade games for the price of one. The game is set against a background of steel girders, ladders, and ropes. Parts of the girders can disappear or appear while you're playing, and against this background, a variety of hazards appear. Bullets, robots, dragons, vampire bats, bombs, and flying saucers, to name a few. All of this is rendered in colorful, detailed graphics accompanied by superb sound effects and music, from the classy opening cartoon to the cute way in which Jumpman bounces as he falls, landing in a sitting position with stars spinning around his head. I have a wide assortment of games to play on my Commodore 64, yet, while some games sit unplayed week after week, I keep coming back to Jumpman. The game offers variety and a challenge, and at the same time it lets me feel temporary success. There is always one more screen to conquer, one more strategy to try, and that's why I keep coming back for more. Jumpman is state-of-the-art in the constantly changing world of microcomputer games. That's saying something. If you were only going to buy one game, this would be an excellent choice. However, you should be aware that there is a new sequel available entitled Jumpman JR, and if it's anything like the original, you'll have a tough decision to make. Epix, 1043 Keel Court, Sunnyvale, California, 94086, $39.95. Review from John Olson. Now, you don't actually have a tough choice to make between Jumpman and Jumpman JR. I actually considered reviewing both of them together, but this game was taking long enough on its own. Jumpman JR is a scaled-down cartridge version, offering different levels, but nowhere near as many, so it's not a tough choice. This original one is the one to choose, if you're going to choose. Now, what made the game so great for its time is just what the magazine was saying. Not only the number of levels, which Donkey Kong had 4 screens, Miner 2049er had 10, which we're approaching, and we're nowhere near done. But also it's in the variety of those levels, how it's so great at changing things up. We're currently looking at a compilation of the more different levels. Now, there is an overall bullet hell kind of theme to the game, but there is no shortage of levels which make things different. As the magazine mentioned, it could be 30 levels of the same thing, or 150 levels a la Lode Runner, which is an absolutely wonderful puzzle game, but it could certainly be argued that perhaps it goes on a little too long. With a game of this type, I want a number of levels, I want a variety to those levels, and I want the game to end. We liberated Jupiter 1, the building blinks in turn, the other 2 buildings will blink as we defeat those difficulty levels, all 3 will blink when we do the grand loop. It's about more than just the high score, although this particular high score proved to be very important to me because my father and my uncle had completely bogarted the table. My father, being both BVD and SVS, has challenged me in his death to a high score run, as he did when he was alive, and as I imagine my uncle, DLG, had done to him in this case. So this one became personal. It's time to get good. Compute, October 1983. If you like Donkey Kong, you'll love Jumpman. Whew. Not even a little afraid of Nintendo there, are you? In the face of cynical comments like, it's probably just like the rest of the climbing motif games, Jumpman easily conquers that skepticism and establishes itself as a software classic. No true arcade game fan who takes joystick in hand and begins to manipulate Jumpman will be able to walk away without adding this product to his Atari, Commodore 64, or Apple collection. It's tempting to compare Jumpman to the much more widely ballyhooed Miner 2049. The comparison would be unfair. Jumpman is much, much more. All in all, Jumpman is a fine game. There are excellent high-res graphics, intricate animation, and enjoyable and unobtrusive circus-like music that plays at the end of each level. These and other nice touches reveal the degree of attention the writers paid to small details and put Jumpman head and shoulders above most other games, climbing games in particular. Epix, better known for its adventure games, has created what should become an arcade classic. And that review from James Trunzo. I would caution against attacking Miner 2049er too much. They're both great games. It would be one thing if that one had come after Jumpman, and then it'd be easier to kind of criticize that one, but, it has to start somewhere. You build upon the thing that came before you. Now would be a good time to discuss the graphics, which Compute described as excellent high resolution. I feel like high resolution is never an acceptable word to use unless you define it and compare it with something else. Now, I cannot talk authoritatively on the various different official and unofficial graphics modes of the Commodore 64, and there are also text modes as well. It's a very complicated subject, but from what I understand, the Commodore 64 has an overall graphics resolution of 320 by 200 in all graphics modes. But saying that is being very disingenuous, because it would make you think that it is comparable to the Amiga in low resolution 320 by 200 mode, or the Atari ST or DOS, and it is not. Even at its best, the Commodore 64 can never replicate a 320 by 200 mode on the Amiga. It's taking the colors out of consideration. The pixels will never completely match. It uses sections of the screens, like 40 by 25 grids, 8 by 8 character blocks. It's complicated. But having said that, the Commodore 64 is quite the versatile machine. It started out with very much an Atari-style graphics system, which is what you see here. But it was built as a machine which compared better to the NES, before the NES was even a thing. And it would twilight as a machine which did a decent enough job of replicating the 16-bit machines. Currently, we are showing you the 16-bit version of this game via a PC booter disk, which bypasses DOS. And with the always stunning 4-color CGA graphics, the Commodore 64, let alone the 16-bit Atari ST or Amiga, had nothing to fear from the PC. And don't let anyone tell you that CGA was better than you thought it was because you could use composite mode to get 16 colors. It is very telling that the first option in the monitor settings for the PC is RGB. It's not alphabetical, people. You weren't going to buy a $4,000 IBM just to be cheap about the monitor. Oh, let's hook up this beast to a television set. No, most people had RGB because it offered support for higher resolutions. And even in composite mode, the Commodore 64's graphics outshine the PC. And don't forget the playability. This game does not play great on the PC. There was a PC Junior release which gave the equivalent of EGA graphics. However, EGA is not officially supported. I am currently showing you a fan patch which, through VGA, offers the PC Junior EGA look. Definitely not recommended. It plays worse than the original CGA version. The PC throughout the 80s was 16-bit by technicalities only, in my opinion, and thus I will likely recommend any other version to the PC if it came from the 80s. Now, you would have a very strong case to make that the Atari 800 is the best overall version. That is what it was designed on. At the end of every level, the girders kind of collapse on themselves, offering a nice animation. The mazes have, more colors to them as you progress. On the Commodore 64, it's always these green girders and blue ladders. Although the text is kind of overblown on the Atari, and the Commodore 64 offers 8 sprites as opposed to 4 on the Atari or the PC. Overall, I love the look for the time. When I think of the Commodore 64, I actually think back to these early days of an Atari style. To me, this is what the Commodore 64 was all about. And it's all small, but it packs in great, lifelike animation comparable to games released much later, like Prince of Persia. When Jumpman dies, you almost feel it. Now, the difficulty of the game has increased quite a bit by this point, some of that having to do with the game's overall speed, which defaults at 4, and I've increased it to 3. But really, by the halfway point, things are getting much more difficult anyway. It starts off as a kind of puzzle game. You die a lot just learning the layout of the level and how best to complete it. Eventually, while retaining that element of puzzle, it adds upon it bullet hell. So while eventually, through repetition, you will perfect even the most difficult puzzles to the point where you probably won't die on a given level, those bullets will always be there to screw you over. I don't think I game overed once on the first difficulty level, although I did reset on the first level after dying twice. On the second difficulty level, I game overed at least 6 times, and I can't even count how many times on the third difficulty. On the first day I had easy mode covered. It took me over a month to complete the last 2 and then the grand loop. Among the hardest games I have ever played if you're wanting to win, and I still have not cracked the high score table. From Gazette, December 1983. They appear to be watching their step now with Nintendo. Buy two, get one free. The thinking man's paradise. Skill, not luck. Needed. Skill is needed. Luck is also needed. A look at this month's best sellers. Number one this month, number one last month. Jumpman. Actually, it was number one December, November, October, and September. Jumpman, which didn't even appear in the August hotware, leaped to the number one position in September and has remained there ever since. The first ever issue of one of my favorite magazines, Info, originally known as Info 64, from the fall of 1983. Commodore 64s and 64 compatible products are used exclusively and extensively in the production and management of Info 64. We wouldn't have it any other way. That would change eventually to the Amiga, with their integrity fully intact. Perhaps the hottest selling game on the market right now, and not without reason. 31 distinctly different levels with different themes prevent an early burnout of single-screen games. Responsive action with 8 speeds and many play options. The puzzle screens will challenge your logic skills as well as your reflexes. Joystick required. I imagine that review was from Ben Dunnington there from beginning until the end. Although with that picture appearing to show a run speed of 9 or 8, Ben, you gotta do a little better. And although it did not appear on the review page later on in the same issue, it was given 5 out of 5 stars, or some kind of cross between an asterisk and a dollar sign. So how about this bullet hell, huh? Skill, not luck, needed. The game is actually calculating what goes on beyond the screen borders. The bullets spawn off screen, and I'm pretty sure they know the general area that you're in when they do that. Unless you're standing in the middle of the maze the entire time, which means you won't win, or you're playing at a ridiculously slow speed, those bullets will kill you. If you see somebody do a no-death run of this game, they're not good, they're cheating. If you are to the left, right, or top area of the screen, which you will have to visit at some point, which is where the bullets are spawning off screen, and your run speed is at 3 or below, you are but a snap of the fingers away from death. And that's if other mechanics aren't getting in your way, like in this level where we get frozen. Currently, I'm showing you a death compilation, but it's not actually representative of my overall deaths. Here you would think was mostly my fault, because primarily I was recording the learning process. It's always fun to see somebody fail, provided they don't make the same mistake twice, and you see them get better. What you aren't seeing are the days and weeks I was perfecting the Grand Loop difficulty. Why am I even going faster than the game's default speed? It's because every 10,000 points you get an extra life, and you want as many extra lives as you can get. You've also been playing the game for 15-20 minutes, trying to get back to where you game overed last time, and you want to get there as fast as possible. Especially if you've been moonlighting, as I have, as 2 to 4 extra players in order to get as many chances as possible to memorize some of these levels. So luck certainly is a factor along with skill, and it's probably why Epic's changed their slogan from computer games thinkers play to strategy games for the action game player. Because there's no shortage of thinking, but reflexes and luck are involved. But they should be honest about it. I like games which offer continued challenges. Luck is the easiest way to produce that. But let's state the truth. Luck is a factor. Returning to Info 4 years later, November-December 1987. When the Commodore 64 was first announced, everyone knew it was going to be a killer game machine. The only question was, who would come out with the games first, and what would they be? We knew that the 64 had the capability of reproducing some of the great coin-op arcade games. There were also arcade knockoffs, games that looked and played like the arcade coin-ops, but got around paying royalties by making subtle changes. They hit the stores early on, and no matter what could be said about the morality involved, these and some other games in the genre were very good. Then we began to see programs that were arcade quality, but totally new designs. One of the earliest was Info's first 5-star rated game, Jumpman from Automated Simulations. It features 31 different game screens and 8 play speeds in a ropes and ladders game environment. For historical accuracy, Jumpman was not technically Info's first 5-star rated game. While Jumpman did receive 5 stars in its first issue, another game did as well, which was David's Midnight Magic. And on the review page, that one actually was reviewed first. So, at the very least, it's tied. Truly going back in time here. Volume 3, Number 3, Computer Gaming World, May-June 1983. In addition to the games mentioned elsewhere in this issue, the following products have been received by CGW. Jumpman, Atari, and Commodore 64. So I showed you that to cover all my bases when I said the Commodore 64 possibly could have been a simultaneous release. That puts it in the time frame for that possibility, although I personally think that the Commodore 64 version probably came out in the summer of '83, which would line up better with those sales charts that I showed you earlier. So to this point, besides some cursing in the background, you probably think that I love this game because, well, I do. But the game is painfully difficult at times, and I enjoy the pain of gaming. This level, though, not so much. Not only is the level a terrible concept of starting out invisible, we get to this level with 3 lives only to game over with maybe a quarter of the screen showing. And what happens when we crawl our way back to level 25, again with 3 lives? We find out that it's not actually level 25, it's level 25A, B, and C.
These are different levels. This level has like 3 different designs to it, which is bullshit.
And the live version of me never said a truer statement. However long it took you to get to this point may compete with this single level. So not only are we dealing with what is probably one of the first ever non-space shooter bullet hells, we're also dealing with controls which are not perfect, though much better than the PC. The ropes in particular have to be done in a certain way or you'll die. There's also levels which have to be done specifically. This bomb first before these other ones or you'll screw yourself over. Add upon it all, invisible levels. Wonderful game to play, extraordinarily frustrating to win. Though thankfully it shows us mercy by following up that level with this nice one, which is easy. So it's not a straight line up in difficulty, it juggles it around a little, which I appreciate. And as frustrating of a game as this is to win, you don't have to, it's not the point. Whether you make it through just 3 levels of every difficulty, or fully complete just the easy mode, you will have enjoyed your time spent with a legendary game. Some games, the point is to win, which makes them hard to recommend if they're too difficult. I just happen to have this unrelenting drive to persevere, and it is an achievement to win this game. Returning to Computer Gaming World October 1983. Commodore International Limited announced record revenues, net income, and earnings per share for the 4th quarter and year ending June 30th, 1983. Now, unfortunately, because this magazine would have been better described as Apple II Gaming World originally, no proper review for Jumpman was ever made. Instead, Roy Wagner used a column to talk about everything. A game that extends the original limits of a good idea is Jumpman from Epix. The game has similarities to Donkey Kong, but honestly enhances the idea. At the slowest, even a 4-year-old can run away from the bullets. At its fastest, watch out, Arcadian. Best of all, the top 20 scores and bonuses are saved to disk. I hope that you can now see that we've only begun to unlock the many areas of gaming available to the Commodore 64. Well, John Freeman doesn't see it that way. I really wanted to write about something less critical this month. Sure you did. But my friends and associates insisted that somebody had to point out that the Emperor has no clothes. I'm speaking, of course, of the Commodore 64, which has to be the most overpriced, deceptively advertised, and user-hostile machine to appear in years. You can get an Atari 800 for about the same price as the 64, and the 400 is much less. An Apple IIe is substantially more expensive, but also a far better computer. Of the Bollywood 16 colors, 5 are black. No shithead, there are not 5 black colors. And there's also an effective 121 colors due to brightness variations. The 64 has 8 sprites, the Atari has 4 players and 4 missiles. Is this douche really trying to downplay sprites? Sound on the 64 rates no better than a toss-up with the Ataris. Oh yeah, nobody ever did anything with that SID chip. Collision detection on the 64 is a joke. What a perfect game to show off how wrong this guy is. John Freeman joining a prestigious list of people whose opinions you should immediately dismiss. The Commodore 64 would outlive the Atari 400, 800, the Apple II, the Apple IIe. Oh, let's throw in the Apple II GS, and the Atari ST while we're at it, both of which had not even been released yet. I don't care how many people bought the thing, you don't last 10 years without there being something good under the hood. Unless you're IBM, of course. An unfortunate stain on the wonderful legacy of Computer Gaming World. You're supposed to have that name Computer Gaming World for a reason, and not only are you relegating the top-selling computer of all time at that point, which was the VIC-20, to half of a column, here you are utterly dismissing what would become the best-selling computer of all time, to this date, the Commodore 64. It's not a good look, especially since Computer Gaming World's coverage of the Commodore 64 and respect of it would grow tremendously. Thankfully, CGW CW's readers had a little more sense than their editors at this point in time, placing Jumpman as the 14th best-rated game. Never seen Apple written so many times on one page. In August of 1989, Commodore Magazine would do an article on Epics and conduct some interviews with employees. My partner came over and said, "Oh, by the way, here's a new program I thought you should see before the meeting begins. Put it in that little slot over by the computer." We borrowed a big screen television to give our people an impressive look at the new role-playing titles, but I displayed the other game every chance I got. The president would come over and tell me to take the disc out. Whenever he left the room, I'd load the program in again. To make a long story short, we left that show with a ton of orders for Jumpman. Incidentally, it was one of Epic's first big hits. 40,000 sold by 1987 of the Atari N64 versions, according to Randy Glover. Very respectable numbers for a computer game back then, and since he didn't mention the Apple II or PC versions, I imagine they didn't sell all that much. So we're watching the Get Good run with a speed of 2 at times. I needed as many extra lives as I could get, finishing the game with 3 lives, but I had gotten 6 extra lives by that point, so I needed them. Spoiler alert, but I'm going to show you the high scores now so we can discuss their meaning to me. I am not a person driven by high scores in the collective sense. I do not care what one man obsessed with one game gets online. I know my worth, and I know the various different genres that I excel at. And I also know that I could max this score out, all 9s, no problem, without even winning the game. It's just one level in particular. It's this one, as a matter of fact. Just sit here and grind for several hours, and you will be tied for the best score in the world. But when there is a mutual respect and competition from friends, family, that can mean a lot. If a game saved the high scores, my dad was there looking at it to see if I ever overtook him in anything. If I did, like several times in Pirates, the wars would start between us to see who was best. If my dad were here today, I guarantee you he would take on the challenge to try and reclaim his top spot. Although, fittingly, somehow, we both are number 1. I'm number 1 with the overall high score, he's number 1 with the bonus score, and somehow it feels right. In October of '89, Commodore Magazine would take a nostalgic look at several old games, including Jumpman. 5 out of 5 stars, the video version of Popcorn. One taste, and you just can't stop. Computer Games, January 1985. Receiving a grade of A. 5 games in one, this frenetic game won our Golden Floppy Award as Best Ladder Game of 1983. KPower from Scholastic, February '84. Ever since the advent of the popular ladder game Donkey Kong, multi-screen arcade games have found a place in most computer users' libraries. Of those, Jumpman is definitely the best for the Commodore 64. In terms of aesthetics, Jumpman has very good but not great graphics, color, and sound, but because it's so enjoyable to play, it will be a long time before you put it away. From 17-year-old Adam Schusselman, could be the first time I've seen a teenager write a decent review on this channel. The first issue of ST.Game, which was previously known as Softline, and as a general computer magazine, I can't imagine it survived the Atari ST's release a year later, but this is from March-April 1984. The will of the people is served. The most and least popular programs of 1983 are now known. Based on the points in Apple II leading magazine, though they claim Commodore will be represented next year. The 7th most popular Atari program is Jumpman. Now, Europe was late to the 64 and Amiga parties, whereas we left it early, so the only coverage that I could find from overseas was the premiere issue of Your 64 and VIC-20, April 1984. Holy Jupiter, it's Jumpman! So you want to know how to complete all 30 levels of the Grand Loop and gain our Mega Transporter of the Year award? Simple. Just play for hours and days and weeks until you die of terminal overconsumption. Apparently I'm late for my death train. Overall, it's a superb game, funny, challenging, and tremendously varied. The animation is masterly. From both Bob Chappell and Ian McKinnell. And so hard to look at those stretched screenshots in the PAL lands. As I've been saying with the Amiga since 2014, if the game came from America, and more than you think did, then it's meant to be shown in a 4:3 aspect ratio at 60 Hertz. It's the same with the 64. Too many people online are showing these games wrong. So final thoughts. Jumpman is a historically significant game. By and large, the magazines and the people understood this at the time, making best of the year lists, top selling lists. It was talked about years later, and it continues to deserve that to this day. It took platformers to the next level, literally with 30 levels. No 2 levels being like adding bullet hell. It's a hard that hurts so good, as you can feel from my expressions at making the number 1 high score. On a personal level, there was nothing like having one final battle with my father, a favorite of my sister's as well, and a real pleasure to come back to it here for all of you. My first full Commodore 64 review. I hope I did the system and this game justice. And though it's probably better on the Atari 800, it's still great over here. Thanks to Songstress for the inspiration to do this. If you don't like the videos, there are written reviews at shot97retro.blogspot.com. Check out Winter Games, Soda Fargo, both from Epix. For some more hard, there's Ghostbusters 2 and Fairy Tale Adventure, because it deserves more love. Subscribe if you wish. See you later. Goodbye.